We are so proud to have you as part of the Vestor Ventures portfolio, but also just to have your presence among founders here today, among Vest members and just peers. So I'd love to know from you, Claudia, if you can kick off this conversation. Tell us what wasn't in the bio and where the term emotional runway came from. I think burnout is a pretty common term nowadays, but tell us what emotional runway means to you.
Yes, not in the bio, mom of two boys. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So reverence, empathy, camaraderie for everybody navigating back to school, mental load, chaos. And originally from Venezuela and have been in back and forth between Venezuela and the DC area always. So emotional runway, one of the things I am, a mom, a caregiver, a founder, a manager, a sister, right? All of these things. And one of the things that I started to feel was I didn't have the words for it, but my emotional runway going down. And what I started to do was I have tools in my toolkit. And so I have a therapist, I have friends, I talk to my sister all day long, right? So like I have self-awareness, but what I found was it wasn't enough. And so I needed a new tool. So I started working with an executive coach who is phenomenal and works with founders specifically. So she really understands like the pace and the challenges of the stage that I'm building at. And she introduced me to this term emotional runway, which is as business owners, as leaders, whether you're managing a business unit or a function or a business entirely, we talk a lot about runway, right? Or burn rate. Like how many, if you did not make a single dollar more of revenue, or if you hit your goals, how many months of runway does the business have to operate on? And so we're always thinking about cost benefit through that lens. And she said, there is such a thing, that's financial runway, right? There is such a thing. And just to ground, I think one of the goals with that term is to provide that forward perspective so that you can make more strategic choices today, so that you can say, okay, if my burn rate is 3 months, then I have different choices that I'm going to be making than if my burn rate is 12 months, right? She said, you need to, she said, I hear you thinking about your run rate, your burn rate, your runway financially, but you need to be thinking about it emotionally too. This is an emotional game as much as it is an intellectual one. And so she really, one of the things that she did was have me do like an energy audit. So what are the things that give you energy and what are the things that don't over the course of your day, both work and family and self? And very quickly, certain things came to the surface of things that drain my energy and things that give me energy. And so she said, investing in things that give you energy is extending your emotional runway. In other words, how long you can run at this pace or in this way. And so what it allowed me to do was to make more strategic choices about what I did. So if we're always talking about boundaries. We know that that is a huge skill we all have to build to have more sustainability in our careers and in our lives. What it allowed me to do is it empowered me to actually set those boundaries. It gave me like almost a rational reasoning behind it. So if I knew that somebody had asked me to book the fifth meeting of my afternoon, but I knew that that would decrease my emotional runway for the day before I have a really important call, then I will feel more empowered to say no. The other thing that came to the surface was the single biggest source of energy for me was time alone, specifically time moving. So what I found was when I did a long walk by myself for 1 hour, if I crossed that 30-minute mark, I started to feel like ideas, creativity, I felt lighter, I felt more perspective. And so she said, okay, if you are one of Keep Company's greatest assets, and this is something that unlocks taking a 1 hour walk every day, this is something that unlocks this key asset for Keep Company. Keep Company is my business. Then we need to figure out how to make your 1 hour happen every single day. And I looked at her like she had 7 heads. I was like, impossible. Like, are you like, haven't I told you what my life looks like? I don't want to take it away from time with my kids, but certainly can't come out of the workday. So I'm like stuck between a rock and a hard place. And she said, if we just look at this strategically, and we're trying to unlock you as an asset. Our goal is to prolong your emotional runway so you don't burn out in 3 months, you burn out in 18 months. And at that point, you've changed enough things that you're not going in that direction, right? And so that's the concept of emotional runway. I think similarly, like that is a micro of a choice you can make over the course of a day. But I think big ones are hiring. Nothing will reduce my emotional runway more than somebody underperforming. So if every day I am not, and we know these choices are really hard. People say, hire slow and fire fast. In practice, when you're stretched thin and have limited resources, that's really hard to do. But I think seeing how much having to course correct an underperformer reduces my bandwidth and emotional runway and how long I can run is very motivating to make some kind of hard but strategic decisions that are ultimately best for me as a resource.
Wow, I love so much that you said. And I think one thing that I got away from it too is that burnout to me feels like very present, like in the present moment. And runway, the emotional runway aspect is it's almost like you can be proactive about something. So again, like I mentioned, this term really resonated with the crew, and we're so excited to have you here to talk about this. As I mentioned, we have founders at different stages. We have professionals in different careers and stages as well. And a lot of the times, founders or professionals maybe sometimes have to wear a lot of hats. And I think a lot of the times it's encouraged to just keep pushing through and ignore how you're really doing. Then sometimes you also have like this mission to your work that feels so critical, whether it's like a social component, a personal tie, or just even the fact that like you are the one putting food on your plate or for other people as well, right? So sometimes taking a second to step back feels like I just can't do that, right? But your work with Keep Company reminds us that burnout doesn't just impact our energy. It affects how we show up as leaders and how we make decisions and how we even feel connected to our work or the people around us. So I love what you were saying, and I think I'd love to know just how do you check in with yourself to really assess how you're actually doing? I feel like that's something that gets thrown around, but how do you put that into practice?
First of all, I think when we talk about burnout or well-being, or even on the more clinical mental health side of depression and clinical anxiety and these kinds of things, I think that we talk about it as a binary. You're burnt out or you're not. You're depressed or you're not. You're well or you're not. And I think realistically, we need to be talking about it as a full spectrum. And so realistically, what we're not trying to do is flip a switch. You're not burnt, you're burned out. I'm going to do these 7 things and it'll be great. In 4 weeks, you won't be burned out. That is not how humans work. And of course, our brains, it's very attractive, right? Like that, like do these things and then this won't be a problem. But we are kind of like living, breathing things that are constantly changing. Our environment is constantly changing. There's only so much that we can control. So we will always be living somewhere on the spectrum. And I think that one of the reasons why so much content and services and things about burnout, why it often sounds like trite and cheesy and not helpful, is because the hard truth is you have to get to know yourself and figure out what that looks like for you. And so if you are reading somebody else's playbook, I don't know how helpful it'll be. If you get lucky and they have a temperament and a personality and habits and challenges and assets similar to you, awesome. Copy their playbook. That is not really realistic. So I do think there is a lot of work of introspection and self-awareness building to understand what that looks like. And there are lots of tools to be able to do that. Certainly reading is one of them, looking at frameworks, seeing what resonates with you. There is everything. I mean, there is therapy, there is coaching, there are peer experiences. We always say that when people are struggling, their options are phone a friend. So like a completely unstructured social environment where they might have bandwidth and skill to support you or not, or one-on-one clinical therapy, right? We need to be building tools in the toolkit across that whole spectrum. And so I think about it often as there are tools like strengths finders and IMAP and personality tests that sometimes are helpful in assessing like not just are you an introvert or are you an extrovert, and how does that insight into yourself, how does that inform your decision making? I remember my brother this is like a long time ago, he was working in banking And he is super, super extroverted. He gets a ton of energy from other people. And he was like 22. And I'm very introverted. I recharge alone. And I remember he called me, he's like, I've been working for 24 hours or something crazy. I'm like, go home, eat, sleep. And he was like, are you kidding me? I have to go be around people because that's how I'm going to recover my baseline. And that's like the ultimate example, right? Like these two extremes. But I think for me, a lot of that awareness honestly came in living through a postpartum during the pandemic. So I had my first child. My first child is 7, almost 8. My second child, I found out I was pregnant with him the first day of lockdown. And so I experienced a very extreme version, like so many of us did, right? Of motherhood and caregiving and working, and active mothering while, And so I think I saw a lot was going around at the time in 2020 in the kind of maternity space, maternal well-being space about rage, about maternal rage and what that looks like, the clinical components, the non-clinical components. And I remember somebody said rage in mothers is often the engine light going on. So when your car is like, I'm empty, a red light comes on. Rage often is that engine light saying, I'm empty. And so I think it is a way, for me, it's a really powerful metaphor for how can you figure out what those lights and warning signals are for you. And again, I'm happy to share what they are for me, but the truth is that that is work that introspection requires.
I think that that having that toolkit component is so important because it is, like you said, it's not a one size fits all. It's not like this is the magic answer. It's really having whether it's other people, whether it's introspection, whatever it is for you, having being able to go to 2 or 3 different things that may work for you, I think is super important. I'd love to know too. You mentioned, kind of your postpartum as well, and I'm sure through building a company or even professional life, there's so many different seasons that we go through. And I'd love to know just your thoughts on how can founders distinguish between like a tough season, something that's something quick or short, or that you can kind of get through, to something more serious like burnout.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there are clinical markers. I think like we at Keep Company, a lot of what we do in this peer support space. So we create groups where we find peers like you in your industry. So what that often looks like is other women at your seniority level, or other people caring for a parent with dementia, other dads who are also at this seniority level and caring for adolescent kids, right? So whatever that looks like for you, because what we have found is that it is the greatest antidote to burnout is actually connection. Feeling like you are the only one navigating something is the greatest accelerant of burnout that I have been able to identify. And what we found was when we were starting, for us, it began with the experience of motherhood, and then expanded into fatherhood and caregiving, and now all employee experiences, which is what we heard over and over again is it feels like I'm the only one. I'm the only one who can't hack it. I'm the only one who doesn't have this figured out. I'm the only one who can't juggle the balls. I'm the only one who doesn't post pretty pictures on Instagram. I'm the only one who doesn't have this big career. I'm the only, fill in the blank. And it's a very bizarre thing to be on the other side of everybody telling you they feel like the only one. And so I really believe strongly that finding people like you is the greatest antidote to burnout. I think that it's worth noting, like, we are living in a time of loneliness. I think most people feel loneliness in one way, shape, or form. A lot of the mechanisms for organic connection that we had in life and at work are gone. They have been redesigned, and we have a ton of flexibility because of that. We have a ton of access, but there is a cost, and it is human connection. And so I think for people that work only remotely, that can be a challenge. I think like you're not going to run into somebody at the grocery store. You might just do Instacart. You're not going to ask your friend to give you a ride. You're going to grab Uber, right? Like there are all of these optimizations that we've done over the course of the last 5 years in particular that have little by little removed these small ways that we connect with other human beings. And I think that that can sound really superficial, but it is truly a core human need. And I think cumulatively, people don't start to realize that that's what they're feeling. And so, you might not say, I'm lonely, but you might say, I feel numb. I feel disconnected. I feel disengaged. I feel isolated. But I think on a fundamental level, what many of us are experiencing is loneliness. And there's so much data. I mean, the former Surgeon General, the parting prescription was about loneliness and the loneliness epidemic and the impact that that is taking. I mean, particularly when you think about elder care, the data says that acute and chronic loneliness is the equivalent of smoking an entire pack of cigarettes every single day. So, like, it has huge impacts to our physical health, not just our emotional health. So, I think when you look at the tools in the toolkit, different types of human connection have to be part of it, no matter where that is for you. But I think a core distinction on the clinical side of like that line with burnout is the numbness I was talking about. So feeling numb, feeling like you just don't can't care. You just don't have enough energy even to care. I think self-isolating for a lot of people can come with burnout. I think this is particularly true with women, like your body will start letting you know. So things will start feeling off. And if you don't listen to the early warning signals of your body, you will get bigger signals. So I do think that particularly with women, you start to see a lot of physical manifestations as well that are the cumulative impact of stress.
Yeah, I definitely saw a lot of head nodding going on in the groups. I think a lot of what you're saying is definitely resonating. I'd love to kick over to Jay too. I know we had our initial icebreaker, so I'd love to know kind of what the audience is saying.
Yeah, so we asked one thing you hope today's session helps you make space for mentally or physically. Maria says she's hopes to leave here feeling more motivated. Allison said, how do I support my hardworking and committed team to avoid burnout when they care so much? Michelle said, sustainable energy for both mental and physical is what she's looking to make space for. So, kind of seeing some of those same themes, like tired, looking for motivation, maybe looking to unplug. It's funny, Claudia, that you mentioned connection is like the competitor to burnout. And Autumn and I were connecting in the chat about when we're feeling burnt out, we isolate. It's nice to know that we're not alone. And I know it's encouraging me to make sure that as a remote worker, which you also mentioned, to make sure we're connecting.
Yeah, I think there's also a theme that I'm hearing in the chat, which is not working or taking a break or resting or encouraging your team to rest. Somebody was talking about that. I think those feel like choices in the negative. They feel like I am choosing not to work. And that actually like tricks your brain into going into a guilt, shame loop. And so what you want to do is try to trick your brain to do the opposite. There's a kind of tool in cognitive behavioral therapy which really focuses on like dissecting our thoughts and patterns there. And one tool that I've taken from cognitive behavioral therapy that has entered this space of like cognitive behavioral coaching, which I think is really powerful, is just asking yourself, what do I value? What matters to me? And so I'll bring this to life with an example I think about often because I think a lot of people can resonate with it. I had my first child. I was having a lot of anxiety about leaving him after I went back to work. I had to travel for work at the time and I had to go to New York. I'm in DC. I had to go to New York regularly. And I remember feeling a little bit panicked, like true, like physical panic about the idea of being in a different city from him, even if it was for 24 hours. And I remember somebody saying to me, don't focus on the fact that you're not going to be with him. Focus on what you value and why those values are driving you to make these decisions. And so for me, what that sounded like, just to bring the example to life, is I value my work. I value the space and skills and means that it gives me. I value showing up for my team. I value giving my husband space to build his skills with the child and his bond with the child. I value having 3 hours on the train where nobody can touch me. Right? Like and that really reframes the experience of these emotions to one of saying, I'm choosing this, right? Like I am choosing to value these things. And so for your team, that might be if you value the sustainability of this work, you need to rest because you value being able to do this for more than 3 more months. And for yourself, similarly, somebody said, how can I show up if I don't want to? I think that this exercise applies there too. You're showing up because there is something you value there, which whether it's being able to have the financial means to make other decisions, whether it is finishing a project that you started because you have a value of accountability and ownership, whether it is the people that you serve because you have a value of something related to the mission. I think that reframe can be really powerful in making you feel like you have agency and like you are in choice. Because I mean, there's so much that all of us are not in choice about, especially right now where we have like 20 macro crises everywhere you look, right? I think it can be really overwhelming. And so focusing on your values and how they're informing your choices. I heard somebody say, I think this is, I think this is not quite right, but there is something to it, which is I heard somebody say, burnout is just living out of alignment with your values. I don't know that it's that simple, right? I think sometimes it's exhaustion or all these other things, but there is something to values when you're thinking about being in choice.
Thank you for your insight on that. And I think that really goes into kind of this next portion of questions too, where one of the things that really resonated with the founders as we were building out this session was talking about how to manage stress or burnout, or build out your emotional runway when you feel like you can't afford to slow down. The business has to keep moving, whether you're building it or whether you're in it as a professional. So I'd love to know kind of what it means to manage all that while you're in the middle, and that idea of really, shaping out and saying your values out loud. I think is super important. And I'd also love to know with Keep Company, it's rooted in the idea that burnout, it's not just personal, it's also structural in the way we built our businesses. And you mentioned that earlier. How can we as founders or as professional C-suite executives too, really rethink the systems that we build around ourselves, whether that's routines, relationship support, and our teams?
I think the heart of why this is such a hard question is because it changes. It's a moving target. So, like, in the same way that I hate the word balance because I think work-life balance is a mirage, it assumes that we have two stagnant parts of ourselves that are not pushing and pulling, and that once you got it, right? Versus really, it is this thing is changing and sometimes it pulls harder, and this thing is changing and sometimes it pulls harder. And then you're in this constant kind of tug of war between these different parts of who you are and your life and your identity. And from my perspective, your emotional skills, your self-awareness, that is strengthening your core so that when you get yanked this way by work or yanked this way by your mother-in-law or yanked this way by school, you can come back to center. So I think like what makes that so challenging, and I'm feeling this now, is as you're in different seasons, what that looks like will change. And so right now I'm really reevaluating my kind of support systems. But at Keep Company, I think what we've come back to is it is about connection to self, how much self-awareness you have about what is the engine light for you, and have you been able to articulate the things that give you energy or bring you back to baseline. One nudge I would make there is like put it on a post-it note and put it by your computer or your desk. The 5 people that you can call that will give you energy, or the 5 things that you can do that will give you energy and bring you back to baseline. Because I think when you're like really in it, it can be hard to remember, oh, I have these tools. Oh, I have these people. I have these things that actually help. And so I think that it is connection to self and then connection to others. And that looks like the relationships you have both at work and at home and how you lean on them and what that looks like. And then the last piece is connection to the systems around you. We are an employee benefit, so the system we often think about is the organization. There is a huge amount of tension in if you feel like your values are not in alignment with the values of the organization you work for, that can really reduce your emotional runway, right? Like, and that makes sense. And so at that point, you come back to like, well, self-awareness, right? Like, what do I need to be in alignment with our values? What's important to me right now? And the answer is allowed to be money today, and next year it's allowed to be time to rest, and then the year after it's allowed to be like you are allowed to renegotiate the contract you have with yourself about what matters, right? And I think that particularly as women, we will have many seasons of care, we will have many seasons of career. It is not linear. And I think that as the workforce evolves, that's just more and more true when so many industries are being like really fundamentally redesigned right now.
I love being able to renegotiate with yourselves. You don't have to stay where you were at 1 year ago, and it's not a failure if you decide that that's not what you need today. So thank you for that important reminder. I have a quick question, and then we are going to see what's going on in the chat. But as founders, it's easy to build a business or again a career that looks good on paper, but it doesn't actually support the kind of life you actually want to live. So I'd love to know from you what boundaries or non-negotiables have been maybe the hardest to protect, but have made the biggest difference for your well-being.
The walk. I'll tell you, like that 1 hour walk in the middle of the day, I'm not able to do it every day, but having an accountability partner to do it. And also there's just these things like habits build on each other, right? So what I have found is that when I do it, I get that positive feedback loop. I see the clarity, I feel better, and then it motivates me to do it again later. And so I think that that has been a piece. I think another piece is leaning on my co-founder. I'm lucky to have a really strong relationship with my co-founder. One of the things that we did, we participate in this program called Tech Stars, and they take you through this like personality assessment where they map out your stress behaviors. And so based on your personality, what do you tend to do when you're stressed? Turns out we have different stress behaviors and they're basically opposite. And so it was super, super helpful to say to both ourselves and each other, when I am getting activated and to a point of stress, this is what that looks like. And so we can wave a flag to each other. I also said it to my husband and my sister and my mom, the people I talk to all the time. Like this is what I learned about my stress behaviors. This is what you might notice. And we've asked all of our team to take the same assessment so that we can all come from a place of grace and awareness, like, hey, I'm noticing XYZ, that might mean you're stressed, right? And so I think that building that awareness and then articulating it can be really powerful. But I mean, I would say over the last couple of years, every 6 months, my non-negotiables kind of change in terms of what the business needs, what my family needs, what I need, and what is pulling hardest. I think for me, the heart of resilience for me is feeling in choice, is really feeling like, yeah, I don't have a big social life right now. That's my choice. I am focused on work and I'm focused on my kids, and that is this season for me, and that's my choice. And so I think that grounding in that has been a helpful tool for me.
I love that, taking the guilt out of like what you're not doing, right? Those negative choices.
Yeah, and I think it's important. So like the difference between guilt and shame, I think is really important in the conversation around burnout. So when you talk about guilt, it is I feel like I did something wrong. I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this and instead I'm doing this.
Mhm.
Shame is I did something wrong and therefore I am wrong.
Mhm.
Or I did something bad, therefore I am bad. And shame is a very powerful emotion. What we find in the group kind of peer setting that we have here at Keep Company is that people will really stay in shame when they feel alone in an experience. So if they feel like they're the only one that's having a hard time with something, it can really bring a ton of shame, and that really creates like a stuckness around you. It's really hard to action out of shame. When they realize that, like, oh, you're like me and you're struggling and you seem great, and you're like me and you're struggling, you seem great. Well, I guess I'm not the problem. Then, so what is the problem? They go into actioning. And so I think like keeping in mind, give somebody a chance to say me too, right? Give somebody a chance to say, yeah, I'm going through that too, because it can be such a quick and powerful way to move out of shame and guilt that something is hard.
Thank you. And I really encourage everyone to really think about like what boundaries or non-negotiables you're building out for this season, right? And again, making that the choice. Jay, I'd love to know how the chat is going, if we have any questions in there.
Yes. I love this one from Autumn. She says, how do you retrain the people around you as you go through different seasons and need things to operate differently? Whether that's employees, clients, family, friends. I think we could relate it to all those.
Oh man, it is so hard. I think the short answer is make it explicit, not implicit. I think that we are often taught not to make people uncomfortable. We're taught to dance around it. We're taught to say like, well, if you can, maybe it was like right, like you're like going around and around, but not saying the thing. And I think we leave a lot on the table because we assume that they're getting the message, but usually they're not. Right. And so I think particularly this is, I would say the one thing that I try to tell that I would say to every woman, working woman, especially female leaders, is make your asks explicit. Do not leave them to be implicit. And so I think for personal relationships and professional relationships, whatever that looks like, it is about saying, does this person have the capacity to support me in this way? I mean, in the context of kind of some of the stuff we're talking about here, and then figuring out what your explicit asks are. I think, for me, it took time to figure out as I entered the like motherhood, it took time to figure out who I could ask for what, right? Like that is an exercise that you have to go through. And so there is also kind of a building awareness of people's limits. Like sometimes people will not have the capacity to support you in the way that you want. And so you can make the ask, but then you also have to accept at a certain point their limits. And so I think being explicit about what you need is really important. I would say one thing that I think is important to talk about that is often not talked about in these conversations is your spouse, your partner, your significant other. I actually find that particularly in conversations about, stress, the mental load, it's like the final frontier. Like it can be a really hard conversation to have because it's really hard to renegotiate those contracts, right? About like those unsaid, unspoken understandings about how we move through our life together. And different seasons require different things. And so I think renegotiating those contracts is really important. And but they're not going to read our minds, right? Like there is work to be done first about building awareness about what you need, because again, in the spirit of making it explicit, you can't make it explicit if you don't have awareness of what it even is.
Oof, that's great. This is a great question from Erica. She asked, can you describe what you mean by choices in the negative?
Yeah. So what I mean is, you can say, let's say that you're feeling physically tired, physically run down, and you have an opportunity to rest. You might say, I'm choosing not to work right now. I'm offering a reframe, which is I am choosing to rest because I value my work and I value continuing to do it. Or I am choosing to rest because I value listening to my body when it sends me this message and I will be honoring it. Or I'm choosing to rest because I value modeling to my kids that honoring their physical needs is worthwhile.
Mm.
So it is making choices about what you are choosing, not what you're not choosing.
I love that. And that kind of disrupts burnout, I feel like, because uh, you have those negative reactions, and a lot of times we're just on autopilot, and then we'll just do things that make us even more stressed out because that's what we need to do or what we feel like we need to do.
I think it's certainly part of it. And again, like I to the point earlier, some of this is on us and some of it it's not. There's a lot we can't control. So the goal is to build skills in getting better and better at managing our energy and what we can control. And I certainly think some of these like frames and tools are powerful in that.
A powerful part too is just learning to let go of control sometimes, or to the false sense of control. Well, I'd love to jump into just kind of our last questions. We have a rapid fire kind of resource questions, and maybe some of this will resonate. I think it's more personal to you, but maybe some will resonate to people here, maybe that are watching this afterwards. So I'd love to know first, what's one low effort thing that makes you feel more human during a busy week?
Making tea.
Love it.
I'm a tea drinker. There's like a ritual My kids now, my 4-year-old, the other day, he was like, I just need some tea. My mom was over and she was like, what in the world is this child talking about? I'm like, it's hot water with honey. Like, it's okay. But yeah, I think like just like the heat of it, like taking, it does make me slow down, even if it's just for like 3 minutes.
What's one thing you do to shift out of work mode at the end of the day? I feel like I struggle with that shifting in and out of work mode. So what's one thing that you do?
So I have started a habit, which is when I get home, I leave my phone in my bag until my kids are asleep. And so I think like I'm not perfect about this. I break it on the weekends and I have my phone around me more than I want. But there's like a 1 hour period when I get home that like that critical, like, bedtime, bath time, like good night, like review the day, homework, like that window, I try to keep my phone in my bag. And for me, that has helped. I think on the flip side, I go and buy a cup of coffee every single day, post drop off, pre getting to the office. And for me, since very early in like my motherhood journey, it has been like a prompt to my brain of like, we're transitioning from this job to this job, from this part of the day to that part of the day. So I actually really do believe in those rituals.
What's one lesson or mindset shift that helped you step into your role as COO?
I mean, I will say, I think it is coming back to this idea that you are one of the business's biggest assets. What strategic choices can you make to unlock this asset? That for me was a huge mindset shift. It took the idea of taking space to move my body as something like absurd and indulgent to do in the workday into something that was like, it's just not a smart choice for me as a leader not to do that because I'm going to walk into meetings with less ideas and less clarity. So I think that for me was a huge mindset shift. The theme of all of this is my coach has really been an unlock because she is to thank for a lot of these things.
Part of your toolkit, right? What's something you've automated or delegated recently that made a big difference?
I mean, what do I not? I am a serial optimizer, and I think Keep Company was truly born out of the fact that I was like, I have strategic frameworks in everything that I do. You better believe I'm applying that to motherhood. And so I think like that is very much my foundational approach. Um, I think I mean, I am leaning really heavily into AI and how I'm using that. I'll say I was using it a ton at work. And then I realized I wasn't really using it outside of work. And so I've started to lean into it more outside of work. And that has been interesting.
What's one wellness or self-care trend you actually buy into?
Touch grass. I feel like there's like a whole thread on TikTok about
Yeah.
it. I think like I would say the number one tool I have discovered over the last couple of years is that there's not much wisdom in the brain. It's all in the body. So like anything that can get you back into the present, whether it's like putting cold water on your face, like touching a leaf, like truly anything that reminds you I am here in this time, gets you out of your head. For me, there's nothing more powerful. So yes, touch grass.
What's a resource you wish more founders knew about or tapped into?
Executive coaches. I think that people use them, but I think it's important to like the fit piece, right? Like I think that for me, I found somebody that worked with co-founders at our stage with our tech. Like I think that piece matters a lot so that they have the full context of what you're navigating. I think finding resources that can understand you as a whole person. She is a woman, she is Latina, she is a like she has an important context. For me, I think that piece is there's work, right, in finding resources that understand you contextually, but I think it has outsized impact.
Absolutely. What's the best non-business book that shaped how you lead or think as a founder?
Honestly, I do not read business books. I read romance novels because that's what I'm doing right now. I don't need to read about business or politics. I need to be escaping and letting my mind go into like happy, joyful, light, low stakes places. So I actually have really leaned into only reading for pleasure over the last couple of months, and I 10 out of 10. I'm very happy with my choice.
Love you. What author are you currently reading?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I just finished one by this woman named Carly Fortune. It was like like my friends were all talking about it. It was like a summer read about like a lake and something like that. I mean, I think that it's telling that I don't even remember. That's like how I consume it. I'm just like, oh, it's just like popcorn for your brain. Like it's just levity.
Love it. And if that helps fill your emotional runway, all for it.
Totally.
My last question, and then I definitely want to jump over to any audience questions that we have. What's one question you wish more founders would take the time to ask themselves?
Who takes care of me?
So powerful. I think, yeah, great way to end that kind of question. And hopefully everyone kind of thinks and mulls over that after the session too. But I'd love to jump over into any audience questions that have maybe popped up in the chat, or please go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself.
I didn't necessarily have a question. I just keep going back to the point that you made about reevaluating a contract for yourself. Because I feel like I'm like, this is what it is. This is what it's going to be. This is my boundary. I'm going to stay with that. And that's what it is. And so being able to really process, okay, there is certain seasons and times and things that shift that I will need to reevaluate. And so I really didn't process it like that. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad it resonated. I will say, like, it's exhausting, right? To like be reevaluating what you need. But it's honest. Like I think like I wish we could all find our forever toolkit. I think some things will be forever, but realistically, I do think that it is like you have to be in a constant conversation with yourself about, is this working for me?
I have a question. I find, and I think a lot of us do, this is evidence of it, that yeah, community is a big part of what supports me and helps me feel like, hey, I'm on the right path, all the things. And I'm trying to do that myself for the people that I want to work with, small businesses, and helping them with marketing to do things not by themselves, but like get things done. But how do you, because there's so much emotion wrapped up in it. What are the impacts from a business standpoint? Like when you're managing communities, and trying to make sure that it's fulfilling both emotional and honestly, your point about feeling guilty about going for a walk, like I feel guilty when I go do one of these things sometimes. Actually, I don't anymore, but like I used to a lot more because I felt like, oh, but I've got this long list of things if I don't accomplish it. Do you help them tie in that community, tie the time spent and the activity to know you're actually checking things off the list, or is it better to just say no, let that go?
It's such a good question. I think like the word that came up as you were talking for me is discernment, which is really like building the skill and knowing when you got to just do the thing. Even if you don't want to do the thing, you got to push through and finish the thing. And
Mhm.
when you can start to change habits and behaviors and build some space. And so I do think there's a level of discernment. And again, I think our brains like binary thinking. They like yes, no, good, bad. The truth is there is going to be more in between. And so if your kind of personhood, let's call it your non-work, non-family self, if I said to you on a scale of 1 to 10, how's personhood today? And you said to me 2, the question is not how do I get you to a 10? The question is how do I get you to a 3?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do we make those incremental changes that over time can be impactful? But in terms of the organization, yes, I mean, we spend a huge amount of time and resources measuring the impact of this. And I would say it's a couple of different things. One is we see that having the right support systems in place drives retention. So our members, the employees that sign up for Keep Company, tend to resign at a rate 3 times less than people that don't in their industry. And so the impact of like, again, like that sustainability is really powerful. What we find though, and this is like, I would say like a core part of our thesis, is that the skills that you build relationally will make you stronger at work. If you learn how to listen, you will be better with your clients. I promise you that. If you learn critical thinking and how to read emotional cues, that will make you more effective in how you manage yourself and how you manage others. There's so much data about how leaders that have and exhibit signs and skills of self-awareness show up as stronger managers and as stronger leaders. So there's a skills piece to this, which are, what are the emotional skills that you need to have in your toolkit? I think when I started my career, it was like, you're a good manager or you're a bad manager. That was like the language. We didn't have a level of granularity or specificity. It wasn't, your team is ineffective because you are a poor communicator and you're communicating from a place of dysregulation and a lack of specificity. So when you're frustrated, people are getting emotional data from you. They have no idea what you want them to do differently, right? We need to get to a place, I think, in organizations where we can speak with more granularity about lack of skill. And I think people learning these skills and practicing them is an important part of that.
Claudia, I have a question. You talked about the importance of family dynamics and spouses and stuff. And then you also talked about loneliness being one of the most critical challenges that we're facing as humans. How do we how can we support like our kids and our families in developing those connections? Because we also take care of them.
Model it, which is the hardest thing to do. It's like the ultimate, like, put the oxygen mask on yourself. But I do think there is, I remember somebody said to me a couple of years ago that they wanted to model to their kids that they choose work. They didn't want to use language that was like, oh, I have to go to work. They wanted to say, like, I choose work because it fills me and I get the opportunity to work in a field that I enjoy. And so, like, they really tried to reframe the language they used around work, and that really resonated with me. And so I think even like my husband and I have like a date night on Wednesday nights. We like pre-book the babysitter. It is a ritual we have done forever. And last week, one of my kids was like, "Oh, you guys always do this." Da, da, da. And my husband said, like, to his credit, he was like, "I value having one-on-one time with mommy, and that is why we're doing this." And so I think that, like, that's like the goal, right? Like, the goal is to be able to use language that's intentional and to say to them, like, relationships don't just happen, you have to invest in them. But I think the other piece of it is like knowing it's work, like knowing that, like, it is work for us. Like, we are doing some of that labor on their behalf. And so, like, that probably looks like, I mean, I let me tell you, I do not want to drive these children to the number of play dates that they are invited to or have or want to have. But I want them to have these relationships. So it's like this constant push and pull of, like, knowing relationships require work, and no matter what type of relationship. And I think, like, while our kids are of a certain age, we are doing that work for them until they can do it for themselves. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know yet. And I think that in the context of social media, obviously, like, not going to go on that whole tangent right now, but yeah, what is meaningful human connection is up for debate right now. And so I think that how we talk to our kids about that matters a ton, especially when so few of us have it figured out for ourselves, right?
So one challenge I have, so I have a 13-year-old, and I find that by the time I get to her after school, my emotional runway is already spent for that day. And then a lot of times she likes to do what teenagers do. And so I'm curious if there are any strategies, as you're balancing being a founder and being a mom, that really work to make sure that you're protecting that emotional runway time for your family, and not giving it all away at work.
Oh my gosh, it is so hard. And I do think it is quite a reckoning when we have those moments, which, like, I have certainly had, and I think most people have had, which is I use the best of me at work. The high energy, the, like, I bring the best of me to work, and that is a hard thing to, like, look in the face. And sometimes it's a necessity and sometimes it's a choice. I think that, I mean, my instinct there, again, I don't have a perfect answer. I think my instinct is to kind of sit with yourself about what matters the most to you in those moments and those interactions. So is it that you have a little bit more of a boundary so that you can protect 15 minutes to like come back to baseline, whatever that looks like for you before that interaction? Or is it that, back to the outsourcing conversation, maybe you do pick up 2 days a week and you renegotiate the terms of somebody else can do pickup so that you are like kind of change. So I would say like rethink it all, rethink the structure, right? And figure out what works for you. Like I know like some people, you know, are you the drop-off parent? Are you the pickup parent? How do you guardrail those interactions so that they don't just work for them, they work for you too? And there's a lot in there that's indulgent, right? Like the assumption even that like you can choose. But where you can choose, I do think there's an opportunity to say, how do I make these interactions work better for me? So that I can show up in a way that feels good to me. And there's room there, right, to redesign, knowing again, there's a lot we can't control, including the mood of our children.